So then the third part is this impartiality, and this is where what we would call equanimity. And this is where you're setting the basis for the full flourishing of compassion, because you're realizing through thinking about this and being guided through these ways of thinking that everyone is the same, and that no one wants to suffer and everyone wants to be happy. And you know that about yourself, and you know that then about everyone else, and we are all the same in that regard. And in the Buddhist world, we would say we're the same as all sentient beings. The earthworms, they are just not wanting to suffer as much as a human being. And that's, although I'm sure they kept this probably to humans. And then they help you to see the short-sightedness of having anger for our people that are difficult in our life, or which you might label enemies. And that easily arises in us, this anger. But what use is it? And also those people shift, even within the course of a day, from enemy or difficult person to friend, sometimes a stranger. I mean, you know, you didn't know somebody and then you fell in love with them and then later you got divorced. So they went from stranger to loved one to enemy all in, you know, however long. So, you know, that helps us to understand that. And then you move on to recognizing the kindness of others and seeing how we are interconnected with all other beings. And this is, you know, all these things are really big topics on their own. But I think that one is very central because it helps us to see how we're all related to each other. And it helps us to see that, of course, it's easy to see that people are nice to me or kind. And it's not too hard to see that strangers are kind when you realize that everything we have is due to the kindness of the strangers who showed up for work and did their jobs. And regardless of what their motivation was, we're benefiting. Then with people who are enemies, you know, you need people who are difficult to develop patience, and you need patience in order to get through life well. So, and a spiritual path, you need patience as well. So they may have done more meditations, I think, than they went into our meditations that we have on love and compassion and that, which are laid out in books like this, How to Expand Love by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Very easy to read book that leads you through the information and then gives you guided meditations, just walks you through the process. And so the last thing I found really interesting about this was this idea of expanding our love and making the circle bigger. In the animal research that they had done on this, they found that, and this is kind of like in our meditation, why we have to find within ourselves and develop within ourselves this feeling of affection for others. That's so important in order to later to be able to develop compassion. You have to work with this and kind of steep your mind in this, and it's all laid out in the teachings how to do this and in this book. But you have to do that so that the person, you have this affection, and that's even in the animal realm where some animals have compassionate behavior towards others, but it's basically, and even empathetic behavior, but it's based on kind of group, kin and group. My group, you have it for other groups, you don't. And I think that's somewhat a natural thing because there's, you know, you want to be safe, you want to be protected, and that certainly seems to be the case in the human realm, that it's so much, we find it so much easier to be loving towards our friends. And we always have this wall of protection when we don't feel safe and things like that. But if we really have the desire to have more happiness in our lives just for ourselves, we can be, as His Holiness says, selfishly wise by learning these kind of meditations so that we can have more happiness in our own hearts and minds, and then be able to slowly extend that out in ways that are comfortable rippling out to the people that we're around. And so that's the value of this kind of meditation, to make the world much more peaceful, both locally, regionally, the whole planet.